Bank can afford it. Well, when they're born, yeah. Hey, son. Yeah, but it's it wasn't less person kind of deal. Okay.
She posted next post factor.
She hasn't slept yet. She's jet lag. She flew right from the airport. What'd you say? Well, we took the stairs and we just the elevator was going to stick. So I'm thinking
Someone might be
got
stuck in the elevator.
Right.
You loaded. How did my sister-in-law do something? She did great. No, I wasn't there. I know. I watched the live. I feel the girls who came with her, they were really raving about her too. She did a good job. I fed that one too. They showed up in college. Thank you for taking everything. Next, things to take care of. So you come to 4 children, so yeah, that's give them time. I started cooking Tuesday. I did that for my sister. So Sunday afternoon, I didn't know about that. Now I'm going to ask about that one. You should. Especially at home, very great.
They don't want us to go to see you because of this, like.
Yes. I want to call to order this meeting of the Shreveport Metropolitan Planning Commission of Caddo Parish. Today we want to welcome you to this August 2nd meeting. Ask if you would to join us as we recognize our invocation and our pledge of allegiance. I ask Mr. Andrews to lead us in our invocation and Ms. Damore too, if you would lead us in the pledge of allegiance. Please join us.
Let us pray. Father, we thank you for this day, and once again we thank you for the opportunity to be called a servant for this, our community, our city, and our state. And here again, we pray that you continue to bless, forgive us for our many deeds, actions, and words that were not pleasant in our sight. Bless those young men, women, boys, and girls who were serving on foreign soils representing this thing we call freedom. Bless our meeting today. Give us wisdom, knowledge, and above all, understanding. It is in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
You join me, please. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God,
Thank you, and allow me again to welcome you to the regular scheduled public meeting of the Shreveport Caddo Parish Metropolitan Planning Commission. For public hearing agenda items, if you wish to make public comments on an application, we have the MPC comment slip at the speaker stand next to the podium. Future notification purposes, it is very important that you fill out a slip and drop it in the box when you come forward to speak. Please state, when you do, your full name, mailing address, and zip code before addressing the board. We will, in each case on the agenda, we will hear each case on the agenda in order and hear first from the applicant and then those speaking in favor. 10 minutes are allotted to the principal spokesperson and 3 minutes for each additional speaker. We will then hear from those wishing to speak against an application. Again, 10 minutes are allotted to the principal spokesperson and 3 minutes for each additional speaker. One representative of the application can then speak in rebuttal if so desired. After hearing comments on each case, the board will then immediately deliberate and vote on that case before moving on to the next case on our agenda. Please note that when the board is deliberating, members of the public are not permitted to comment. Any member of the public may request a copy of the board's decision on a particular case by contacting our office at 318-673-6480 after 1:00 p.m. tomorrow, or by accessing our website at shreveportcattlempc.com. For consent agenda items and other agenda items not requiring a public hearing, public comments can be made upon request by filling out an MPC comment slip. If comments are requested for a specific agenda item, the chair will offer an opportunity for those comments prior to the commission taking action on an agenda item. All of the MPC board decisions are subject to appeal to either the city council or the parish commission, depending on the location of the property in question. Please note that it is your responsibility to contact the appropriate governing body about their procedures as related to the matter that you're concerned with. Copies of this document and phone numbers to contact the governing bodies are available on the table next to the podium and in the entryway to this room. As a courtesy, ladies and gentlemen, please remember to turn off all cell phones while the MPC board is in session. The commission values your testimony and appreciates your compliance with these guidelines. We will move to our agenda. Item 5 on our agenda, approval of the minutes for our July 5th meeting. So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Andrews, a second by Ms. Dave Martu to approve the minutes. Are there any questions? Hearing none, all in favor vote yes, all opposed no. Minutes have been approved unanimously. We next move to our consent agenda. All right, our first case is,
Now we have to vote on
no, I'm sorry.
it. A motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'm sorry. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I do.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. All in favor vote yes, all opposed no. It is approved unanimously. The first,
Sir, can you tell us who did the motion, who did the second?
I'm sorry, we have a motion by Ms. Dave Martu, a second by Mr. Young.
And please note that items 6, 7, and 8 have now been approved, so if you're here for that meeting, for that particular case, your project's been approved.
All right, so anyone who may have been here for case number 6, 7, or 8, those have been approved on consent. Our next item first item for public hearing is case number SC 47-17. Is there anyone here to represent the applicant?
Good afternoon. I'm Tammy Owens with Ford and Tablata, 920 Piermont Road, Shreveport, 71106. We're asking for approval of this subdivision plat for another unit in Providence. It's an 18-lot, single-family residential subdivision, and it's consistent with the master plan.
All right. Any questions? Thank you. Is there anyone else who wish to speak in favor of this application? Seeing none, is there anyone who wishes to speak in opposition to this application?
Mr. Chair, motion to approve.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Young, a second by Ms. Damar to approve. Any questions? Hearing none, all in favor vote yes, all opposed no. All right, it passes. Next case is case number 10, item number 10, case number SP-103-17. Is there a person here to represent the owner, the applicant?
Good afternoon. Andy Craig, Moore and Associates, 1324 North Hearn, Suite 301, representing WDS Development. The plat before you is 32 additional lots, the next unit of Lake Shreve Estates off of Mayo Road. We would have been before y'all back in 2012 with this unit, but if you remember, that was right after the drought, and there was a moratorium on drilling wells in that area. And we're going to have to add another well to our system there, but weren't able to because of the moratorium. So we've explored possibilities, and as it turns out, we're going to be extending a city water main on Mayo Road from Wallace Lake Road, a 12-inch main, and connecting to our system. We'll be able to get rid of our well, our ground storage tank, all of that, and enable us to continue the development of this. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Are there any others who wish to speak in support or favor of this application? Is there anyone who is here to speak in opposition to this application?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to bring your attention to something we received shortly before the meeting from a gentleman by the name of Kenneth Johnson, who has submitted information that is in your packet in opposition to this preliminary and final
My name is Kenneth Johnson. I live at 183 Mayo Road, Shreveport, Louisiana. And we live directly across from the pond that this subdivision is going to be built on. And in the past, we've had flooding because they concreted all the property around the subdivision, cut all the trees down. So I've had to spend $10,000 just to widen the ditch by my house in order to keep my house from being flooded. And also, right at the present time, they got a sewage pipe running on the right-of-way on Mayo Road, which is against the law. And I took pictures and showed that. So in order for them to do this other subdivision, they need to fix that. Thank you.
Mr. Sweeney, are these the pictures that are in here from today? Like it says August 2nd,
Yes, sir.
2017?
Those are the pictures that the gentleman just provided to me about maybe 3 hours ago.
Okay. Who's your addressing the question
To you, I was asking if I could ask a question to Mark.
to? Oh, to you? Yeah, I thought you were in one of
Okay.
those. Ms. Damar too?
Mark, who's responsible for all is it the city or the parish that's responsible for the sewer pipe and the drainage of the water and all that?
It would be through all of our comments and correspondence went through the parish Department of Public Works. And we always give them an opportunity to review and make comments on any of these plats to identify any issues or problems.
And none were identified?
No, they were not.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Young?
Thank you,
and
Mr. Chair.
Ramirez?
Mr. Sweeney,
I noticed on the plat, of course, the parish had to sign off on this, on stormwater detention and all that.
That's correct.
That is correct. So, once again, we're back to that standard rule that the water cannot come off that property any faster than what is currently coming off that property. The other question I have real quick is I'm looking at this pipe on this picture, and I appreciate Mr. Johnson submitting it to us. This looks like stormwater detention. I know that they said they're going on city, and I'll ask Mr. Craig this when he comes back up because I like to pick on him. But about how they're currently handling the sewage, because it looks like a stormwater detention pipe to me, maybe coming off a detention pond, but I don't know that, so I'll ask Mr. Craig. And
Absolutely.
so I'm sure he'll have all those answers.
You ready now?
Yes, sir.
Mr.
I'm done.
Craig?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Oh,
You-
Mr. Craig, would you
Yeah,
want?
Mr. Craig, you would come. Does he have a copy of the?
Have you seen these pictures, Andy?
I gave it to him.
All right.
I'm not aware of
Stormwater
what,
detention issue first, and then talk about have you seen that white plastic pipe?
I have not. This is the first that I've seen of it. I do not know where it comes from, but I will find out.
Could you just
It
talk about the
is-
sewage a little bit then? So
It is not sewer.
Okay.
We designed the treatment plant there, and it's sitting right by the lake. We're discharging directly from there into the lake. The detention for the subdivision is the existing lake, so
Okay.
that's handled by the spillway. We had to extensively rework that dam at the direction of DOTD years ago. It was an old embankment, had trees growing on it. We had to make great improvements to it. The developer spent a lot of money on that. It's a possibility that pipe could be draining the area behind the dam where the treatment plant is. But I don't recall. But it does not have anything to do with the sewer unless it's just draining off the surface water. But I can look into that and report on that, because I need to know what it is.
But the department of the Parish Department of Health has signed off on the treatment plant, and they've signed off on the stormwater retention using the existing lake that's there, the
Yes.
pond that's there.
Yes, all that has been done in the past. We're just proceeding on. So there's really no changes to anything that I'm aware of except adding some more lots and extending the streets and the utility system. So
The gist of where I'm going is that's beyond our level. Those approvals come from other governmental agencies, and once those approvals
when we
are
submit the
submitted, we just have to
subdivision
work off those
plat
approvals.
and the street and water and sewer plans, then that's when those will be reviewed, and details like this can be addressed as necessary. But yes.
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you, Mr. Ramirez.
No, I just, I was gonna ask the other gentleman a question, but I guess
Mr. Johnson?
he's already gone.
Did he leave? No, he's here.
When you spoke, had you made any complaints that went with that had gone unanswered on the, to the parish or the?
Yeah, the pipe runs directly off the sewer treatment plant, and it is sewage. You know, I mean, there's no doubt about it.
Okay. But,
And it creates a
But have you-
scum upon there's a
Yes.
creek, a small creek that runs beside my house.
but have you made those complaints?
Years ago, but nobody wanted to come look at it or see anything. They said they had a permit, but I've never been able to get that permit yet.
Okay.
And it is against the law, I know, to run any kind of water like that on a public right of way,
Okay.
even if it isn't sewage.
Yes, sir. Well, and this just a little, maybe some helpful advice, but when dealing with the government, just be persistent and call your parish commissioner. I believe it's,
Yeah, I will do that. I just found out who he was. We used to have Thibodeau, and I had talked to him about it, and he came out and looked at it.
yeah.
The dam there itself, and when they develop this subdivision that they're going to develop now, which is going to increase the water flow, they're going to concrete all the streets, so they need to divert that water out of that pond into somewhere else.
Yes, sir. Well, I just wanted to know if they were ignoring you on the.
Yeah, they ignore me. If you don't have money, it's hard to get anything done.
No, I mean, if you're consistent, you persist with the complaints and you follow up with them. But I assure you, Mr. Atkins is a good man, and if you call him and stay in communication with him and ask him to help you get it resolved, I think that's your best course of action.
Yeah.
And because we've seen the rest of the developments out there.
I have nothing against develop as long as it's done right.
Yeah, I understand. I'm just saying that they usually hold those folks to high standards, that they spend millions of dollars on infrastructure to be sure, because the city and parish won't sign off on it until they, or which is why they hire these firms to design everything. So I would just be really surprised if the parish were allowing them to continue to develop and they were dumping raw sewage.
Well, it's not raw, it's coming out of their treatment plant, but
Okay,
that's
well,
still illegal.
Yes, sir, either way, but just continue with those complaints, because we want to be sure that the government is working for you the way it should. So that's all,
Okay.
thank you.
Mr. Johnson, Ms. Cooper
One
has a
quick
question.
thing, have you, met Mr. Craig before today?
Well, I met his boss, the guy that owns the subdivision.
Maybe you two could talk for a minute and y'all could figure out who needs to be approached. And
Well, I've tried talking to them, but they don't listen.
Okay, well, maybe in person today, face-to-face.
I talked to his boss in person in Bossier City.
Okay, well, now you've got a public record and a video.
Okay.
So maybe that'll help. Thank you.
Thank you.
I know, go sit over there.
All right. Is there anybody else who's speaking opposition? Hearing none, rebuttal?
If that is the sewer treatment plant effluent, and I don't doubt, Mr. Johnson, we'll check into it. When it was initially designed, it was going into the pond. It may have been rerouted subsequently going there, but we do have a permit for it. I can get Mr. Johnson a copy of the permit. So it is fully permitted, and that won't be a problem. So, anyway, just want to let y'all know that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any other discussion? This position.
First to approve.
I have a motion by Mr. Remedios to approve.
Second.
Second,
Sorry.
by Ms. Cooper. Any questions? Hearing none, all in favor vote yes, all opposed no. All right, that is approved. Our next item is number 11, case number SC-104-17. Is there someone to speak on behalf of the applicant?
Andy Craig, Moore & Associates, 1324 North Hearn, Suite 301, Shreveport 71107. We're representing the developer on this project also. This is an undeveloped tract right across from Ridgewood School on Baird Road. The tract had initially been planned for a nursing home, but the people that owned it sold out their nursing home interests, and so they had this 20-acre tract, wondering what they could do with it, and decided to see if it was feasible to develop it as single-family residential development, which is before you today. So I'll try to answer any questions y'all may have on it. All city utilities are there: the water, the sewer.
All right, Mr. Young.
Andy, just real quick, do you have any idea what size houses these are gonna be?
Pardon?
What size houses?
I don't know that they've decided, but it's not going to be upscale. It's going to be kind of mid-scale.
Yeah, I mean,
It's not going to be
go along
lower
with the
scale.
neighborhood.
It's not going to be entry level, but somewhere in the middle. But that neighborhood, it's an older neighborhood, nice community, nice neighborhood, but the houses are older. So it's going to be kind of mid-level, probably 1,600, 1,500 square foot.
Good. That's all, Mr. Chair.
All right. Any other questions?
Yes.
Yeah, yes.
Mr. Craig, on the part, if you put that previous slide back up, do you have any idea what they plan on doing with the other part on this side of the white line or yellow line, where it says R3? Yet, I mean, in the future, they're just talking about the part that has the diagonal lines in it? Am I correct?
It's the whole thing. We're going to do a R1 type development, but that's a use by right in the R3. So we didn't have to do a zoning change according to our information from the staff. What we want to do with this is allowable in the R3 zoning. It was initially zoned R3 for an apartment complex, if I remember right way back, but that they were going to try to come in and do the nursing home. That didn't happen, so now we're going to try to do this subdivision.
So the entire parcel is,
Pardon?
the entire parcel is,
The entire parcel, yes. The first unit is that north line
Gotcha.
right there. That's just the first unit that is before you. And if there has been a master plan submitted for the whole thing, yes.
gotcha. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Any other questions for Mr. Craig? Thank you, Mr. Craig. Is there anyone else who's here to speak in support of this application? Is there anyone who is here to speak in opposition to this application?
Mr. Chair, motion to approve.
I have a motion by Mr. Young, and a second by Mr. Andrews. All in favor, vote yes. All opposed, no. All right, it passes. Our next case is item 12, case number C-72-17, zoning requests. Is there someone here to speak for the applicant?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Tom Arsenault. My address is 333 Texas Street, Regents Tower, Suite 700, Shreveport, Louisiana 71101. I represent the applicant. Wanted to tell you a little bit about Progressive Bank in case you don't know. Progressive Bank was founded in Winsboro in 1975 and subsequently has spread across North Louisiana, entered Shreveport Bossier a few years ago. They have two branches, one on Airline Drive in Bossier and one on Fern Avenue. This would be the third branch of Progressive Bank here. It is a community bank that enjoys a good reputation. This location is at 9405 Ellerby Road. It's on your screen. If you have a larger one, if I may, Ms. Mel, a little bit larger view to show you what is where. Of course, Kroger Marketplace, the big gorilla in the area is the Kroger Marketplace, and it's across the street, and it's a C2 PUD. The RE here is actually Grace United Methodist Church, so it's not a residential use. The rest of that corridor is certainly going commercial, and it's highly unlikely that there would be any residential development in this area. This map, how do I make it bigger? I do the thinking. This map on the map. All right. Bad joke. I got that look. This just shows you where the uses are with All Souls United Methodist Church. There is another branch bank, Barksdale Federal Credit Union, is here with a drive-in in the back. And then the other commercial uses that you've seen. You've had a couple of cases along this corridor that you have approved recently. Give you an idea of elevation and what these are going to look like. Progressive Bank uses the same format for all of its branches, and as you can see, it is a quasi-residential design, so it should be compatible with the designs in the area. Just to let you know that that will be the case. There is a conceptual site plan, and I think the most significant thing that is there, now I need to go out. Thank you. If you'll notice, there are homes behind this tract. And if you'll notice the proposal, and this is a conceptual site plan, the site plan is not in front of you today, but the conceptual site plan leaves a significant buffer that would be outside of the fence so that it would still maintain a natural use, so that those people looking across Gulf Ridge Drive will see woods rather than this building. Then they'll have a fence. The landscaping plan plans to keep all of the mature and significant trees in that back area. So it is a plan that will work effectively. It should not have any impact on the neighbors to the rear, and will focus the activity on what is in the front. The proposal does include, as you can see, a potential second building. That there's not a specific use for that building at the present time. It will be marketed. The bank plans to sell that tract. So the bank, because it will be occupying the property where its location, will be very concerned that the condition of that, the use of that property will be compatible with the low impact use that the bank has. They have drawn a kind of a conceptual elevation of what that building would look like, so that you can see it will have should have some nice design features. Again, that's not in front of you, but we wanted to make sure that you were aware of how that might work. We have reviewed the staff report. Staff report is favorable, and we would respectfully request that you grant the C2. I will point out to you that under the UDC, in order to have a drive-through, it has to be C2. So there's and requires a special use. That will be before you next month. So that is already in process and is scheduled for hearing next month. That's one reason the C2 is necessary for this use. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, I was just looking at the Barstow Federal Credit Union. I guess it's a credit union, not a bank. It does not have a drive-through?
It does.
And it's a C2?
No, it's grandfathered. It's grandfathered.
So if they did any modifications or changed it?
That I didn't look that deeply into it, Ms. DeMarteau, but I believe that that's correct. I think it is actually now a C1, but it does have a drive-through. The bank, I am not aware of a suburban branch bank in Shreveport-Bossier that does not have a drive-through and an ATM. So, in terms of competitive marketplace, that's something that the bank would need to have. Any other questions?
If I'm looking at this correctly, is there one house behind all this?
There are two. There are two. There's one, Dr. Wood's house, I think is here. Well, I'm not, I understand there are two houses. I think this is all the Unitarian property. I think that's Mr. Militello. I know that Mr. Hampton, the president of the bank, visited with Mr. Militello. He also visited with Dr. Woods.
And is that Gulf Ridge Drive a private drive or a city street?
It's a public street. I don't know whether it's a city or a parish street.
Oh, I know, and there's...
It's right on, yes, ma'am. I do not know the answer to that, but it is a public street. It's not a private drive. No, yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
And then finally, I'd like to, we have a letter of support from Lawrence and Antoinette Gutman, who live at 9454 Red Oak Lane, which is in the vicinity. I just received that today, so I'm asking that it be made part of the record.
All right.
Any questions?
Any other questions from Mr. Arsenault? Mr. Young?
Just to make sure we're all on the same page, today we're only looking at the zoning change. Any critiquing of the site plan will, if this is done, will happen at the next month's meeting, and I wanted that on clarity, so.
I believe that's correct, Mr. Young.
Okay. Because if it's approved, then maybe some of the comments about buffering and, buffering on the east side of the property, because of the residents and those type of things. Because it shows a wood fence on the back, and it's all conceptual, I get all that.
Well, there'll be a wood fence along the back, but what you're going to have, what the conceptual site plan shows is there's a fence, and then there's additional parts of the property that will actually be there that will not be fenced, but will be green space. And then there will also be landscaping on the inside part of the fence.
I was really just trying to make a clarification that we're just talking about the potential upzoning, and then the critiquing, if it's approved, or of this potential site plan would be next month.
I believe that's correct, Mr. Young.
I just want to make sure we're all on the same page on that. So, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Tom.
Any other questions for Mr. Arsenault? If not, is there anyone else who'd like to speak in support of this application? All right, seeing none, is there anyone who'd like to speak in opposition to the application?
Barbara Gerald, 101 Napoleon Drive, Shreveport, 71115. I'm the pastor of All Souls Unitarian Universalist Church. Our church is probably not opposed to this, but this week, while I was out of state, I received my first phone call about it, and have not had a chance to review this to find out which building they are talking about as the bank building and which one is the proposed later on. Just a little time to review it is what I think would be in good interest of my church. And like I said, we're probably not going to oppose it, but we would like to be informed about it. So I don't know if we just need to say we might have an appeal later and not oppose it now, or
Yeah. Well, this what we're doing, Pastor Gerald, just for today is we're voting on the zoning change. The site plan, what it would actually look like, and what would actually happen as it relates to ingress or egress and those kind of things would be decided via the site plan, which is the next step after.
Okay.
So this
Thank
is the zoning change.
Thank you.
Someone else who is, anyone else who's in opposition?
Yes, Neil Irwin, representing Dr. Paul Wood.
Let me do this.
Yes, sir.
I saw that we had typically the principal spokesperson is the first person who speaks. I don't think Barbara intended to be the principal spokesperson, so in deference to that, then we still, I don't know if you or someone else will act as a principal spokesperson for the opposition.
I believe everyone's agreed that I will be.
Okay. Thank you.
And we didn't know about All Souls Church, but my address, by the way, is 415 Texas Street, Suite 101. We join in All Souls in saying that you really need more time to consider this. We think that the rezoning and the request for the drive-through are tied together because there's such a significant impact on this residential neighborhood. As we point out, with respect, under the UDC, a drive-through, which can only be considered in C2, cannot be routed so that traffic exits into a residential neighborhood, which admittedly this does. Therefore, we think that it would be at least in your best interest to consider delaying a decision today on the rezoning until you hear and get the background on the proposed drive-through next month. You have a handout. Do we have an extra copy of that? Is what Mr. G? Yes, there were sufficient copies where there was an extra. Yeah, good. Mr. Arsenault, I think, would probably like to get one. I'll give that to Stephen. You've received a memo in which we suggest there are 3 reasons to deny or at least delay the decision. Number 1, C2 rezoning is just too much and definitely would be illegal spot zoning as differing measurably from the surrounding zone land use without a rational reason. If you see on your screen right now, this property and everything surrounding it is zoned RE. Could I get that up? Is that possible? You also have before you a detailed map of the actual use on the northeast side of Ellaby Road. And while Mr. Arsenault made the statement that the area is, quote, going commercial, I suggest with the greatest respect that there really is no foundation for that statement as we're talking about on the northeast side. Let's just go down the road. This property right here is Dr. Wood's front yard. He owns all of this property to Ellerby Road. Then you have the Progressive Bank proposed site. Next to it, you have the Unitarian Church. Unless I'm mistaken, they're going nowhere. Next to them is the Bluffs upscale residential subdivision, which I'm fairly positive is going nowhere. Next to them is an adaptive reuse of a residence by Ilios Resources. This is what that looks like. So while it is a commercial use, it is an adaptive reuse in a residence. Next to it then is the Barksdale Federal Credit Union, which has one driveway to Ellerby Road, just one. It has a drive-through, but does not route anything into a residential neighborhood, and just has one driveway. It is zoned either B1 or C1. And next to it, at the true commercial corner of Florno and Lucas and Ellerby, you have Cush's Grocery, and that is the only B2. All the way through here is not a commercial use of not anywhere being talked about in the way of a C2. Again, on the other side is Dr. Wood's front yard, and next to it is the property that was proposed for a strip center in May of 2017, which you probably remember. They requested B2. You denied B2 and instead allowed them to have B1, but under a specific condition that use approval is contingent on development of any structure on the site as residential in design character consistent with the established residential pattern and style of the neighborhood on the east side of Ellerby Road, including sensitivity to compatibility in paving and parking. It was recognized by you as a precedent that this property, if it was going to be used, could not just be a strip center, and I will show you what was proposed. This is what was proposed. And you said that was unacceptable in terms of its architectural design. Instead, you said that it needed to be compatible with the two professional offices next to it on the north, a CPA office and an attorney office, which are both zoned B1. You said that if the property just to the south, right here, was going to be used, it had to be compatible in design, and B1 was what was allowed. C2 is not B1. C2 is a much more intensive use that really has to be carefully considered as being completely out of character and spot zoning. C2 is for commercial corridors, and as we've seen on this side of Ellerby Road, that is not a commercial corridor. Over here is Grace Community Church, so the only commercial is here. So it is an overstatement with respect to say this area is, quote, going commercial. It is not. Now, if commercial rezoning is considered, and therefore we say it must be restricted to architectural design compatibility, C1 allows an office plus a bank use, but no drive-throughs. As Mr. Arsenault said, C2 is requested because they want a drive-through. But under the UDC, a drive-through which directs traffic into a residential neighborhood, and we know this is an exhibit, but it is important for you to know, directs traffic into a residential neighborhood is prohibited. And it's very interesting on their exhibit, their surveyor who drew this actually drew in Dr. Wood's driveway. Here is the drive-through, for which they would be entering off Ellerby Road through the drive-through and exiting right into the neighborhood, almost directly across from Dr. Wood's driveway, where Dr. Wood and his family have resided for 33 years. Next to them is the Militellos, who have been there for 27 years. And it's important to note that while this is a public road, there is no paved turnaround at the end. So if someone would come out and take the wrong turn, where are they going to turn around? They're going to turn around in Mr. Militello's driveway or Dr. Wood's driveway. This is not what was the intended use of Gulf Ridge Drive and is directly prohibited by the UDC. Again, you said in terms of architectural compatibility, this property just to the north, 2 lots away in May, was unacceptable. And compare it with what you just saw. Does that look much different? The suggestion is no. So if this was unacceptable, your precedent says this is unacceptable. And while it's stated that they plan to sell the property, if it's rezoned C2, it is not going to be, as stated, a low impact use. It is a high impact use. For all these reasons, we suggest that this be denied today, or at the least, a decision be deferred and delayed until you have the public hearing next month on the drive-through. I'll be happy to answer any questions. There are a couple of other speakers who I know would like to speak.
We have a question, Ms. Cooper.
Question, Mr. Irwin.
Yes, ma'am.
Based on your study of the UDC, because I know that you have a lot of experience with these types of laws, is there any way that you think that we could carve out a C1 for a bank like this that would allow for some type of drive-through? Is that possible? Or would you have to study that, or?
Well, it says drive-through. No drive-through shall direct traffic exiting into a residential neighborhood, and that's clear.
Right. So if, for example, if that was not approved, the city council did not approve, are we city? Is this parish?
City.
And they needed to come up with another route, maybe in and out onto Ellerby or something. Is there any way you can craft that into a C1? Or is a C2 the only way to get a drive-through? Is there any special use option?
That's what it says, to be completely honest with you. I assume they could apply for a variance.
That's what I'm wondering about your take on that.
Right. I would assume, and Mr. Sweeney would ultimately have to advise you, but I would assume they might be able to apply for a variance, but we would say a C2 use, regardless of how it's done, is going to be too intensive. We could see potentially, if you would consider it appropriate to have a low-intensity commercial, that a C1 would at least provide less traffic into the neighborhood, but still, the way it's designed now, with a potential, as shown at least in this exhibit, 62 parking spaces. That's a lot of traffic coming out this way.
Okay, so do you know if your client would be able to accept something lesser like a C1 if there was no exit onto the onto the residential road?
Well,
would you see a C1 fitting into that corridor reasonably?
My client is here, and I know would like to say something about that. We had said back in May, when this came up, that there is a ravine right here between this property and Dr. Wood's front yard. And that really provides a natural boundary between what was B1, 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 then residential, church, residential. Any commercial here, I think you'd have to think hard about, Ms. Cooper, in terms of whether you think that really is appropriate commercial as a migration from across the street when there really is none here, except for the Barksdale Federal Credit Union closer to Florida Lucas. And I'm trying to be candid with you. I mean,
I hear what you're
you'd have to,
saying.
you'd have to really, I think hard about that. And I think it should not be made hastily until you have a chance to consider the entire impact of the potential drive-through prohibited by the UDC.
Mr. Sweeney?
Just to make it real clear, there is not a pathway for a drive-through bank in C1 under the UDC, because you can't get a variance to add an additional use. A variance is only a variance to an existing requirement. So that pathway doesn't exist without you doing a text amendment to the ordinance, which would take several months to do. So I want to put that on the table first. Number two, remember, you're not dealing with the site plan. You're dealing just with the rezoning. That is all. So any conversation we have about what he's brought up is the conversation that would occur under this special use permit, where you will see the site plan in its final version for your consideration. So I don't want to mix apples and oranges here. You're just considering the rezoning stuff.
Right, it's just uncomfortable deciding the two separate meetings because C2 opens the door to a lot of things that might not be banks, whereas a bank is pretty docile. C2 opens the door to other things, and so if they didn't get their driveway, they might want to, it could be developed into something else.
And remember, the C2 uses are not egregious uses. There's not a whole lot of difference between C2 and C1. Be mindful of that when we did the UDC, we narrowed that scope enough that it made sense, but the uses are still compatible with the neighborhood. But remember, regardless of whether or not they come forward with their special use permit for the drive-through bank, even if they got their zoning for C2, they have to go through site plan review and approve administratively regardless. So anything that was done for their property in the future would be controlled by the eventual approval of the site plan. So those elements that have been brought up already today are site plan issues and not really zoning issues. The C2 zoning is across the street. It is becoming more prevalent along in that corridor. It is not necessarily a major shift. It'd be different if there's a C3 or C4 or something along those lines. But C2 is still workable in this corridor.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. DeMontu?
Yeah, I have a question. I don't know who can answer it, Mark or Mr. Irwin. You mentioned something about residential neighborhood. What signifies a residential neighborhood? Is it one house, more than one house, two houses, five houses? What signifies a residential neighborhood?
Well, a residential neighborhood could be any number of houses you want to put on that definition. But let's be point blank clear. The statement that it cannot be used for or invade into a neighborhood, this driveway for the proposed, what will eventually be seen before you for a drive-through bank, does not actually enter into that neighborhood. It will access back out onto Ellerby Road. It's not going, any traffic flow that's going to occur is not going up into the neighborhood, unless a neighbor or a person that owns property up there wants to come down and do their banking there.
So a
99.9% of the traffic is going to go out onto Ellerby Road.
Okay, but residential neighborhood could be just one house.
If you wanted to make that type of definition, there's not a real clear definition there, but typically it's more than one house.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, that's kind of the definition.
If I could just add to that, the whole statement that's made in terms of the UDC about drive-through facilities says more than just it cannot enter into a residential neighborhood, which of course we completely disagree with respect, that this would not be entering into a residential neighborhood. You saw how it's designed. It's across from Dr. Wood's driveway. It says all drive-through lanes must be located and designed to ensure that they do not adversely affect traffic circulation on adjoining streets. Then goes on to say drive-through lanes on corner lots must not route existing traffic into adjacent residential neighborhoods. We would say the first sentence of that, regardless of whether it would be said that it routes into an adjacent residential neighborhood, is going to have a huge effect on the traffic on Gulf Ridge Drive, as you will hear already is occurring from Dr. Wood and Mr. Militello.
So at next meeting, and you get a chance to look at this special use permit, you can assess whether or not you believe that access to that drive should remain. You would have the ability to remove it from the table. I'm not suggesting that you should, I'm just telling you you have that option. You would also have the option under a special use permit to add on additional conditions that you see as a benefit to not only the property, but the adjacent properties. If there's certain design elements you want to add on, certain components, you can do that then. That again is under the special use permit. So all the things we've been talking about today are for the special use permit and the site plan approval, not for the zoning.
Although we suggest you cannot decide this in a vacuum, obviously. If you could give copies of those to some of my application. Any other questions, Mr. Chairman?
Any questions for Mr. Irwin? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Irwin.
Thank you, Mr.
Anybody
Chairman.
else to speak in opposition?
Hello, I'm Dr. Paul Wood. I live at 224 Gulf Ridge Drive, Shreveport, Louisiana, 71106. And that is my home right there with this proposed commercial development essentially in my front yard. I think Neil did a great job of talking about the technical facts. I'm going to talk a little bit about the emotional aspect here. First of all, to clarify one thing, those properties I think really should be considered a residential neighborhood, because before I bought the property in 1973, they were incorporated into the Los Robles subdivision. I purchased the property in '79 and built my house in '84. We're all emotional about our homes. For most of us, it's our largest investment. So this is a really big deal for me. Nobody wants a commercial development, essentially in their front yard. But it's not just emotional, it's conceptual here to me. If you look at the view, the aerial view, you see the east side of Ellerby Road is completely different from the west side of Ellerby Road. It is a wooded neighborhood. It's all residences. Everything that could go commercial has already gone commercial. The B1 properties to the north. This is the only property that would be available to become commercial. The bluffs are there, 24 really nice high-end homes, new homes. Then there are 7 to 8 homes on Reddick Lane, Reddick Road. There's Miltel's home, my home. There's the Alsos Unitarian Church there. As Mr. Irwin pointed out, all residential. The statement that this is a neighborhood in transition or that this is going to become a commercial corridor is wrong. It is not. It's not going to be Uri Drive of 30 years ago, for example. It is a small area of a half of a block. And again, all residential at this point until you get down to the Barksdale Federal Credit Union. And again, that's a bank that has a drive-through and 1 entrance and exit, not 2. So I think it's very important that there's no potential for other commercial development here other than this particular property. The proposed drawings so far for the Progressive Bank show almost the entire lot being paved and with just a small green area at the back. And it looks like they're going to build a strip mall on the west, or on the south, I mean. So in summary, as things stand now, I would respectfully request that you deny their zoning request. It's mainly because there's really no potential for future commercial development on that side of the road. I think banks, businesses, restaurants, whatever, have plenty of room to go on the west side. It'll be there. There's a whole lot of vacant land where a bank could build a building. I'm sorry, thank you for your time. You asked a question about whether I'd be amenable to compromise. Of course. I mean, I think compromise is important. I would be happy to talk. My time's up, I know, but I'd be happy to talk about that a little bit. I just have a couple of sentences here. if the bank would be willing to just put one building in the center of that lot with one entrance from Ellerby Road, make their pass-through go around and come out the same way that Barksdale Federal Credit Union has done, and leave most of the trees there to keep the wooded neighborhood residential look, and not include the additional office buildings that huge building they showed, which looks like a strip mall, and allow Golfers Drive to become a private drive to where Mr. Militello and I could keep it landscaped. I know from talking with Leon Militello that he would agree to that. And I've talked to the neighbors, and they would agree with that. That is something that we would all like to see happen. So there's some room for compromise, I think. I'm trying to be mature about it. And so, again, without any further information on this, I would respectfully request that you deny this zoning right now. We can all come back next month. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Mr. Young?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dr. Woods, is it fair to say one of the primary concerns is the exit out of the proposed parking lot on the Golfers Drive? That
Yes,
is
sir.
probably one of the main concerns you have.
Yes, sir.
And then the fact of the buffering and shielding of headlights or whatever. I would say, to my opinion, this is just my opinion, that a bank is probably one of the least, even though it's a C2, it's probably one of the least intrusive because of the hours they operate. They operate literally banker's hours. And so that as opposed to other retail that is going to be on the northern end, even though you've got a buffer and a ditch and you want part of that property as well. So to me, the bank, even though it's a bank and it's a C2 for bank reasons, because of their hours of operation, it would have the least impact, especially on weekends and nights as opposed to that. So I too asked some of the people representing the applicant about that particular exit on that Golfers Drive, and did it have to stay there? So because it's a dead end road with no turnaround down there. So that too was something that brought up to me as well. So that is one of the big issues. Am I correct with you?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. In the hours of that the bank are open, that's fine. That's great. But with anytime tellers, cars circle through there all night long, anytime they want, and those headlights will be aiming at my house as they curve out. So that's my big problem with it.
Okay. All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Anyone else?
Is there anything else for Dr.
Woods?
Oh, I have a letter here from the Battens who live on Red Oak Lane that I'd like to include. Thank you. In opposition.
Thank you.
If I may add something, the initial phone call that I received said nothing about a possible addition of a strip mall.
Just, if you would, state your name.
Barbara Gerald, All Souls Unitarian Universal Church. The initial phone call I had from the gentleman from Monroe, who I'm not from Progressive Bank, said nothing about the additional building. I was given the impression that it would be bank. Just for environmental impact, since this stuff has gone in across the street, we have wild animals on our property. We also have a nature trail on which Eagle Scouts have done a number of projects, built bridges and stuff for the nature trail. I mean, it's something that has kind of absorbed a lot of this stuff from the changes in the other neighborhood. It falls well into the residential surroundings and the bayou that's behind us. But anything significant like a strip mall or the possibility and potential for a strip mall would really change a whole lot of what we do with that property. Thank you.
Any other opposition?
Good afternoon. I'm Sue Hines. I live at 9406 Red Oak Lane. I think y'all are familiar with Red Oak Lane. In the 17 years that I have lived there, I have seen so many changes, and they are not changes that I would have ever anticipated and certainly didn't want. The lot behind our house was potential residential, as were the other two close to us. About, I guess it was 10 or 12 years ago, we made our first trip to the MPC meeting to oppose those places being made commercial. I think the first proposition was maybe a B1 or so. Anyway, in the years since then, I have seen so many changes in our little residential neighborhood. And I'm here today to support Dr. Woods, but also to bring attention to future problems that this might bring. The lot behind us has been cleared, and we also, as Dr. Woods said, made concessions. We had lots of meetings with builders and with you all and with your advisors, and finally did compromise and come to an agreement which denoted those areas for offices. And now we're going into the next step, and what's the next step and the next step? It's just taken away from what we intended as residential for all those years. And so I guess I'm here more than anything to support Dr. Woods and oppose the changing of the area, but I'm also here to point out when this started and how it's changed and changed and changed, and ask you all not to keep changing it and not to keep making it something that it didn't seem to be intended to be at the time. So I appreciate your time.
Any questions? Thank you. Anyone else speak in opposition? All right, rebuttal?
It's coming down.
Somebody else coming?
Lemoyne Batten, 9452 Red Oak, right behind where Paul lives, 71106. I don't want to drag this out. I know y'all are, tired of us griping about it, but I pretty much know everyone on Red Oak Street. There's 15 houses. We're all against this. We stand behind whatever Paul is working with Mr. Irwin with. So just wanted to throw that in.
All right, rebuttal?
You can't ignore a 500-pound gorilla. And that's what's across the street from this property. When the YMCA sold the camp, for which I was a counselor and waterfront director, and that huge concrete improvement was made across the street, it changed the nature of what's across the street. That's a 2.2 acre tract. It's not going to be developed. Your common sense tells you it's not going to be developed as a residential property. No one's going to spend that kind of money and put that kind of house to look at Kroger. Just not going to happen. This is a modest use of this property. It is an appropriate use. Your staff has reviewed it. All of these people, with great respect to them, I am very sympathetic to them because their world has changed. But Progressive Bank did not change their world. Kroger changed their world. And that's just a fact. And the widening of Ellerby Road, all of those factors are what are causing this property. And property that faces on Ellerby Road, if you have any common sense at all, is going to develop in the way that it is going. And if you look at the wider view of these properties, not just the little snapshot of those, but if you go all the way up to the fire station, you go all the way to the corner at Florino Lucas, this is going to be a commercial use. This is an appropriate use. It is not spot zoning, and we ask that you approve it.
Any questions? Thank you.
I do have a question. Wait. I do have a question, not for him, for Mark.
Ms. Demo too?
Why are these, maybe you've already answered it, somebody's answered it, but why are these being brought to us separately, the zoning and the planning separately? Because it's really hard to kind of divide the two.
Number one, it's set up that way that if someone wanted to ask for a rezoning of a property, they can ask for it as the first move in the process. If the applicant gets to the next meeting and you all deny the special use permit, he still has his C2 zoning, but he can't put in the drive-through bank. Now, it's kind of a chicken and egg scenario, but let's say you deferred this case to the next meeting and you talked about the zoning, and then the special use permit came in right behind that. Well, if you ended up denying the zoning, the case for the special use permit would be null and void, because there would be no reason for you to pursue or proceed
So
with
it'll
that.
always be separate. Okay,
Right.
thank you.
All right, any other, no other discussion, we need a motion?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I'm going to motion to approve with the attitude of compromise as an opportunity when this comes before us again. And that's my motion to approve.
Second.
So I have a motion by Mr. Andrews, a second by Mr. Remedies to approve. Any questions?
Just one comment, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr.
That I still have concerns about, I want on the record about the exit drive. I would have this just because I just think it ought to be on the LB Road like all the rest of them up and down LB Road. And when the site plan comes for us next month, I'm going to critique it.
Then you got my message.
Yes, thank you. So, but with that caveat, thank you, sir.
All right. Any other questions? Hearing none, all in favor vote yes, all opposed no. It passes. Our next case is item 13, case number C-73-17. Is there someone here to speak on behalf of the applicant?
I'm Andrew Corby's the fourth, 330 Marshall Street, Suite 200, Shreveport, Louisiana, 71101. Thank y'all. I'm representing Royal Kiran, who wants to put a convenience store and a wine spirit store on the old Don Seafood location. And similar to what Mr. Arsenault said, you can't put a gas station on a C1. It has to be C2. Then you have to go to the special use. And Ebony has this map up, and I was going to bring it up, but basically that's the zoning for that corridor of Kings Highway in Crestville. And if you notice, it goes all the way down, and then it stops a little bit, and then it's all C2. The majority of it's C2. And Crestville is I would call it a major kind of, Kings Highway is a major corridor. It's 25,000 cars a day go in front of it. And Crestville, I would call it a minor corridor going into downtown with about 8,000 cars a day. So you have a Family Dollar up here, and you got the Brookshires across the street, you got a Chevron across the street, and you got a Wendy's, and then you have a laundromat. So I have a site plan I kind of showed the neighbors. We could take a look at it and show you what this guy is willing to put into the property to make it more compatible with the neighborhood than what's there now. Don's has been vacant for 8 years. It's dilapidated. It's not into, it can't be rehabbed. It costs too much. If you have to buy the property and rehab the building, you can make it in the restaurant business, and it's not set up for anything else but a restaurant or no movie theater. So my client is from Monroe, and he's got a partner that lives in Bossier City, and they have a convenience store just like this on the corner of North 18th and Forsyth. If y'all are familiar with Monroe, right across the street from Marie Place, a very high-end subdivision in Monroe, right down the street from Neville High School. Similar, this is right down the street from Burt High School, and runs a very good operation. He also invested in the corner of Flournoy Lucas and Uri Drive, which was a 10,000 square foot convenience store with a restaurant, pork grill that had a very good write-up in the paper, and then a wine and spirit store and a convenience store. So when you have people coming into this town wanting to spend a lot of money improving property, putting taxes back into the coffers so the city can improve roads, sewers, and things like that, that's what we want as a citizen of this town. And on the other hand, he's got a vested interest, and I think he wants to continue to build stores in this area. And he's got a very good line of credit, and we plan on doing about 8 to 10 more. So this is a great location. It needs to be rehabbed because the whole area, really from Shumpert down all the way until I'd say Centenary College, is in really a sorry state of repair, and it needs a lot of commercial investment. So this is what he's planning on doing. Well, you got it. And you can tell it's a shingled roof, hip, and a canopy with 2 entrances into the store, 7,200 square feet. The parking lot is not going to change. The brick wall that's existing around the Dons ain't going to change. The driveways that are currently existing from the Family Dollar and then the one going across the street, we're not doing anything different. When we did a pre-site plan, it was determined that the city's gonna improve that intersection. And so on Highland and Kings Highway. I tried to get with, Robert was out on vacation this week, and I tried to get with his assistant. Andy Craig said he didn't think they needed any more property, but if they improve the intersection, they're going to take away from one of the corners. And so but I would like to have that information, but we know that's going to happen. So anyhow, I think it's needed in the community. I think it's, you know, the guy's putting a lot of money out there. I know we got some neighbors behind us that aren't happy with it, but that's just the way of the world. It's changing all the time. So I think it'd be a good asset. We could put oak trees all in the back. We could hide it. Or went behind the Family Dollar, we could put a 24-foot cinder block fence, just like they have behind those residences. I don't know which is better. I think keeping the fence there and putting some oak trees would look better. So, any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Quirk?
I was on the queue, but he answered the question. The look of it was what he's going to build according to the diagram, and it looks very compatible to the neighborhood. So that would answer my question.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Andrews and then Ms. Davis.
Just in case I missed hearing you, sir, you will be demolishing the building that's currently sitting there?
Yeah, either we will, Corinna Monroe, or the current owner is going to demolish it. Because he was trying to sell it for a funeral home, and it wasn't going to work. Ben Walker, who represents him, said he's had people like Zaxby's and some auto parts and things like that, and they just never have come to fruition. So if we don't get this and build that, according to Ben, and he told this to the neighbors, he's just going to, and this is his right, he's a landowner and he has rights, he's going to tear it down, and they're going to be looking at an asphalt parking lot with a Goodwill drop-off. You know, we could use better, you know, it's a tough decision, but it's not that tough. I mean, this is about a $4 million investment on a major east-west corridor.
Is it like a packaged liquor store?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just what he has out on Kings Highway. I mean, Flournoy Lucas. I can show you some pictures of it if you want to see it. I mean,
okay, I was just curious.
I mean, packaged liquor. I mean, liquor. You go to Bossier,
But
you can
you're
buy
not
it in a
gonna have, like,
grocery
little
store.
wine bar in there or anything
No,
like
it's
that?
not going to be a wine bar. It's not going to be that. He's got a high-end liquor store. It's like Cuban. You know, he's got
She
like
wants
Cuban.
those like consumption.
Uh-huh.
That's a different zoning, correct?
I mean, he could sell wine and beer.
Yeah.
That's a matter of right.
Not, but I'm talking about on-site consumption.
Wine
Different
tasting?
story, special
But
use.
that's some other ABO issues that you'd have to.
No. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Porters. Is there anyone else here to speak in support of this application? Anyone here to speak in opposition to the application? Whoever the principal spokesperson is, who will have 10 minutes, will speak first. Everyone else will have 3 minutes following that.
I won't be very long.
Thank you. My name is Graham Todd. I live at 503 Atkins Avenue, 71104. I live right across the street from just the way of the world, as Mr. Quirby's described it. I want to talk about vision.
Excuse me, before you move on, can you point out where the residence
Right
is?
here.
Right there.
The primary house. If you've driven by there, it's the big yellow house on the hill. As Mr. Arsenault said during his presentation for the previous motion, once you put that big commercial thing out there, no one wants to put a house across the street from it. Right now it's zone C1. They want to move to C2 to open up the doors, Pandora's box. This action would clearly result in a loss of value to those who live across the street. But I disagree with Mr. Quirby's that that's just the way of the world. That isn't just the way of the world. This is a democracy, this is America, and we should have leadership and vision. In 2013, I retired from the Air Force when I was living in Bossier City, and my family, we decided to have some vision, and we decided to move to Shreveport because we had a vision to put our children in Caddo Magnet High, and we also had a vision that our children would attend Centenary College. My daughter graduated in May, and she starts at Centenary on Friday. My younger daughter starts her senior year at Magnet in a week and a half. We are trying to live out that vision in Shreveport. We made a financial commitment of over $350,000 to buy that house so that we could execute that vision in a residential neighborhood. Part of the problem is that sometime long ago in the past, there was a decision to make that area C1 from the residential use. And that has now created the problem we have before us, which is that abandoned commercial property, essentially commercial blight, right in a residential area. See, there's a difference between commercial property owners and residential owners. I think everyone here is a residential property owner. You mow your grass, you take care of your landscaping, you take care of the outside of your house, you invest because you live there every day. That's the way residential owners treat their property. Commercial owners are in it for one reason, the way of the world, that is the dollar. So for example, in Madison Park, when Brookshire saw a better opportunity, they left one building and moved to another building because it's the way of the world to make more money. And now we see how good that property looks in Madison Park. It's abandoned. The folks who did manage Don's Seafood at some point ran into financial distress, obviously. And now we have, for 8 years, dilapidated, abandoned property, because that's the way of the commercial world. If it's not good for business, you get out of it and you cut your strings. People don't abandon homes. That's the difference between residential zoning and commercial zoning, most simply. This is not a vision by a gentleman who does not live here to spend $4 million and improve a commercial property and make everything better. Because as the next speaker will point out, the property right across the street is already an existing gas station. Clearly, what you will get is that you will improve one property to the detriment and expense of the nearest commercial property that sells the exact same thing, gasoline. They will put her out of business, which will then create a new abandoned commercial property. Essentially, the city of Shreveport will be exchanging one abandoned commercial property for another abandoned commercial property right in the same area. That is not leadership, that is not vision. Nor is it leadership or vision to put a liquor store in a residential neighborhood on one of the main thoroughfares to Byrd High School. This is Atkins Avenue. I live here. We see the kids drive up and down. In fact, so many kids used to park on that street that the city had to put signs and restrictions in place for that street to not park there anymore. We're not allowed to park there after 7 o'clock. It affected my use because of kids driving up and down and parking. This is where they will commute. In fact, on the last day of school, they all drove down that road with sitting on the top of the cars, and the police had to come and help them because they were driving recklessly. That is the road they take to go to school. Do we really want to put a liquor store, and that's what it is, a hard liquor store, and we know practical common sense says that's where he's going to make most of his money, is selling that. Do we want to put that in a residential neighborhood where high school children who we know have to deal with the temptations of the world, and we had to change the drinking law from 18 to 21 because of the challenges they face at that young age, right in front of their face? I want to read real quickly the basic definition of C2. It says it is intended to accommodate the commercial corridors of the city of Shreveport. For the record, I think it is undisputed that Atkins is not a commercial corridor. To make this C2 would clearly be contrary to the whole development and zoning of that area and would be contrary to the Uniform Development Code. C1 talks about serving the needs of the neighborhood, and that's where there needs to be vision. Is the city needs to have vision to be patient and wait for the right person to come along and redevelop this, whether to change it to residential and put residences back there like they once were, or some sort of slight commercial use that doesn't produce a lot of traffic, because what you will get is you will get an outpouring of traffic onto Highland, which is not a commercial corridor. It is a residential corridor. Those are all residences up and down Highland, not businesses. You'll be increasing the flow of commercial traffic of folks who are coming after picking up their packaged liquor to head down Highland Street. There will not be an increase in revenue. When we met with Mr. Quirby's earlier, about a week ago, he talked about an increase in sales tax revenue. That's not the case. There's no evidence to point to that suddenly there will be a boon in gas sales and liquor sales in Shreveport like never before, and so there'll be more sales tax. No, all it means is people will go from one place to this place to buy their gas and liquor. Still the same amount of consumption. There will be no net increase and benefit to the city of Shreveport as far as sales tax.